we tend to conserve things like personal energy in order to manage our stress and well being. And essentially, what that means is that we cannot pour from an empty emotional cup. How we can take advantage of all the time we spend together at work to be intentional cup fillers for each other. Thank you. What a lovely intro that is. And yes, my name is Meisha-ann, and I am a workplace activist and scholar of human behavior. So I will start us off with another C word, and that C word is customer. So I'll ask first, how many of you work for a business that has a customer? Good, because that was a trick question. Anybody who buys a thing or uses a service is a customer. But we can think so much more broadly when we think about this idea of a customer. A patient is a customer of a hospital. A student is a customer of a school. As citizens, we are customers of our government officials. I would argue that anybody you care to treat well is your customer. So you can think about friends as your customers, your loved ones, your partner, your little broke besties, aka your kids. They're your customers as well. We all exist in some way to serve other people. And how we do that absolutely matters. It matters for our personal relationships. It matters for our businesses. It matters for the world and society at large. So I said that I was a scientist and scholar of human behavior, so you'll hear a lot of research in what I'm talking about today. The first thing I want to talk about is a model called the Gallup Path. And it's a metrics-based model that links human behavior to business and economic outcomes. It was developed in 1996, and it shows how our feelings and our emotions determine how well businesses retain customers and grow revenue. It is a super, super well supported model. There are lots of individual studies that support it, but it is also supported by a meta-analysis, which is a study of studies that make us extra confident in what all the individual studies tell us. And essentially, what all this research tells us is that human behavior drives the performance of businesses. And as we know, when many businesses perform really, really well, economies thrive. Strong businesses are continually growing their revenue, and strong economies have lots of strong businesses that are continually growing their revenue. How do you grow revenue? Well, you maintain and grow your customer base. So let's take it back to the customer. Who knows the customer best? It's not the CEO, okay? It's the front line. It's the people that interact with the customer day in and day out. This is where a lot of your best ideas emerge. If your customer feels like they're being treated well, they are understood, their needs are consistently being met, they will stay with you, spend more money with you, and tell other people to be a customer of your business as well. So the other thing that Gallup finds is that human well-being is not only linked to organizational things like absenteeism and performance, but also societal things like healthcare utilization, violent crime, how long you live. Nothing works if we're not okay. So how are we doing? Well, we're not doing well. According to the research here in Europe, only 13% of people are fully engaged in their work. 40% say they have very high stress levels. 49% are struggling in life. This is really, really sad. Here in the Netherlands, 30% of people that responded to a Gallup survey said they felt very, very sad yesterday. We're not doing well. So, stress and how you feel about your life is not solely determined by your work, but it is a huge factor given how much time that we spend at work. And the research supports this. People who like their jobs are far more engaged and more likely to be thriving in life, not struggling. People who don't like their jobs report higher levels of stress, worry, and any other negative emotion that you can think of. So, we talk a lot about people leaving companies, and yes, that is important. But what we don't talk about enough is the people who stay with companies but are not giving as much as they could to their customers and their coworkers because we're not taking care of them first. This idea is related to another psychological theory called the conservation of resources theory. And that theory is also really, really well supported by research. And it tells us that we tend to conserve things like personal energy in order to manage our stress and well being. And essentially, what that means is that we cannot pour from an empty emotional cup. So, the title of this talk is It All Starts with a Human, and it does. So, what I want to talk about today is how we can take advantage of all the time we spend together at work to be intentional cup fillers for each other. There are two fundamental practices that I'll talk about. One is recognition, one is check ins. And for each of those, I will give you 5 things that you can do to maximize the impact of those practices. Who's ready to be with me? All right. Okay, so let's start with the fundamentals. Everybody wants to be seen and acknowledged. When we leave our loved ones and go to work every day, the worst thing that can happen is for us to disappear and be invisible. And yet, this is what happens to so many people. And it has an impact on us emotionally, it has an impact on our well being. According to Gallup, 13% of respondents to their latest State of the Workplace study in the Netherlands, again, said they felt a lot of sadness in the previous day. So we have people coming into work that are not well, and work is not helping that. There are so many people that go into work and become a faceless cog in a machine. These are not conditions that inspire people to do their best work and to serve their customers and coworkers as much as they can. So, Adam Grant, an organizational psychologist, did some research on this. And he found that when people are made to feel grateful, it increases what we nerds like to call pro-social behavior. And what that means is it makes people more helpful when they're grateful. Not only are they more helpful to the person that made them feel that way, they're more helpful in general. All right, so I want to paint a better picture of what work could look like. So let's say you wake up in the morning and you are actually excited to go to work. And you're so excited, you start thinking about work in the shower, and not because you dread it, but because you're looking forward to interacting with your coworkers. They're actually your friends, right? And you're looking forward to the interactions that you'll have that day. You know you're going to laugh at least once. You know you're respected. You know you're going to listen and be listened to. You feel like all this time you spend away from your loved ones is time well spent and is in service to a bigger mission that you actually believe in. Sounds like a fairy tale, but it is possible. And it starts with acknowledgement, or to say it differently, it starts with recognition. Because when you strip recognition down to its essence, it is about people feeling seen. So I want to talk about how you do that well. And the first thing to do that well is to recognize with intentionality. Recognition must be intentional, thoughtful, and detailed in order for it to be meaningful. Yes, a simple thank you is better than nothing at all, But if you keep giving these simple thank yous without any kind of detail or intentionality behind it, it can feel authentic and it can make that thank you lose its impact. When you are thoughtful and detailed, when you highlight the specific action somebody took or the trait that person displayed and the impact of those things, it strengthens connection, it increases engagement, and according to our research with Gallup, it makes people feel more valued, cared for, and thriving in life overall. Now, we do research with our client data as well. And in those recognition messages, we're analyzing for specificity. And what we find is that when people receive more specific messages, they are more likely to stay with the organization. That's because of human connection. When somebody takes the time to give you a heartfelt message of acknowledgement and appreciation, it connects you to that person. If this happens over and over, it turns coworkers into community. There's something that makes this effect even stronger. So when others chime in on this moment, it becomes what I like to call a love fest. And this love fest matters. So one recognition moment can have a ripple effect with all these people chiming in to add their own appreciation on top of it. This is a collective celebration and it absolutely matters. Our research tells us that when recognition is public and shared, the connections are deepened and retention is improved. But that doesn't just happen. So that brings me to my second thing. In order for us to have this love fest and this community building that I referenced, this is something that has to be embedded in your culture. It cannot be happening in pockets in your organization. Otherwise, you're not going to get those congratulations, those comments, or that love fest. Also, if it's not embedded in your culture, you're missing other recognition goodies. When you intentionally acknowledge and recognize a behavior and do so publicly, you are sending a signal. In my opinion, signals in organizations are vastly underrated. The signal it sends tells people this is what good looks like here. It creates a roadmap for others to follow and it allows good behaviors to catch on in your organization. This is how you craft a culture. But you also get another benefit. And this benefit is what we call the witnessing effect. Yes, there are good things that happen when one person recognizes another. It fires people up, it connects people. But there are additional good things that happen when the moment extends beyond one individual to another. It changes the game from I feel very appreciated to appreciation is something that happens around here and something I see all the time. And you can literally see here the increased impact in things like feeling respected, connected, appreciated, stress and burnout, and even psychological safety when we see others getting appreciated as well. So let's go back to the person to person appreciation for a minute, because that is where it all starts. And that's how you help people feel seen and valued instead of invisible or a cogless, a face in the you know what I mean. A cogless face in a machine. No, that's not right. But you know how those words fit together. Okay. If you recognize people and it doesn't match their preferences, it doesn't work. So, because it makes people feel like you don't really know them at all. So imagine, for example, you give an expensive gift card to a steakhouse to an ethical vegan, and you do that in an all hands in-person meeting, right? You can see how that would backfire. The person doesn't eat steak, and oh, by the way, they also don't like to be publicly recognized. And so it feels like you don't really know me at all. So that leads me to my third element, which is personalization. Remember, the point here is to celebrate people as individuals. So the recognition experience has got to be individualized in order for it to work. In our research, we do see that people have a definite preference for public versus private recognition. However, if you recognize privately, you don't get the witnessing effect that I just talked about. This is where technology really helps you. When we look at the percentage of people in our survey research who say they prefer for recognition to be only private, and we compare that with a percentage of people that opt out of our social feed, there is a big difference. So, this suggests to us that even people who prefer private recognition consider the social feed to be a more palatable form of public recognition. I mean, we're all used to social feeds now, right? And so you get all of the benefits and none of the ick. The other thing is when you give a recognition message in our platform, you can add points to it. So this is another element of personalization and individualization. Because when you give people points as opposed to a gift card, they can redeem for what they wish in our catalog. So you will never again give a steakhouse gift card to an ethical vegan. You are welcome. Here at Workhuman, we believe in the power of choice. So people can redeem their points in our catalog for whatever they want, wherever they are in the world, for something that matters to them based on their location, their culture, their individual preferences. It's what they want, not what we want. Sorry. How cool is that? All right, so we have talked about the things you need to keep in mind to make recognition really work really well. We've talked about one, two, three of them. Okay, so the first one is authenticity and intentionality. The second one is embedded in your culture. The third one is personalization. Number four is recognize, recognize, and recognize again. One of the things I hear a lot when I talk about recognition is recognize when people go above and beyond. Yes, but that's not the only time you should recognize. And here's why. Recognition really is positive reinforcement. Yes, it is a way to appreciate and acknowledge people so that they feel included, connected, and seen. But it is also a way to help people learn. Now, the theory of positive reinforcement is very basic, very old, and it is so well supported that it makes its way into things that we just do naturally and don't even think about. So, if you have a puppy, right, there is a chance that you've given them a treat in order to train them to do something you want them to repeat. This is because of the theory of positive reinforcement. When we get something we want after something we've done, we learn to repeat the behavior. It is undefeated. It works every time. It even works on grown-up human animals. So, if there is a behavior that needs to be a habit in your organization, this is the way. This is the way. And when things get rough and people have to do a lot and times get hard, this is when you really want to double down because nobody wants to do all this work that nobody is seeing or acknowledging. That is a recipe for stress, burnout, and quitting. So recognition needs to be fulfilling. People who do a lot should get a lot of recognition for that hard work. And when you recognize that hard work, you are using positive reinforcement to intentionally craft your culture and to take a strategy idea from something that is just an idea to something that is actuality through execution and positive reinforcement. This brings me to my final element for recognition, and this one is really, really important. It is equity. If I do something and my coworker does something, I should feel like we have an equal chance of being recognized for that behavior. If you're playing favorites, you are doing it wrong. But we are all humans at the end of the day. We are biased, and that's just how we're built, right? Again, this is where it's really helpful to get this in a system. so that you can look for equity gaps and proactively correct them, similar to what we do with pay equity reviews. And Joanna will show you later how our system helps with this as well. All right, so we've covered the 5 elements of impactful recognition, and hopefully you remember all 5. But this begs the question of, where are we with all of this? How are we doing? So we did some research with Gallup in 2022, and what we found is for all of the 5 things that we discussed, most of our sample said they are not experiencing these things where recognition is concerned. So most people do not feel like they're getting recognized enough, or that the recognition they receive is authentic. It's not embedded in the culture, individualized, or equitable. Our employees are telling us that we can do better, and they need us to do better. We did some more research last year on this, and we found some other really interesting stuff. So, good things first. The number or percentage of senior leaders who said recognition was really important in their company, that went up 42% from 28%. So the word is definitely getting out there. More people are also saying that they work in a company that has a recognition program. That's great. That's up 40% from 34% in 2022. All of that is good news. Unfortunately, in that same study, 55% of our sample either said they are not being recognized or that their recognition includes none of these things that we talked about. Again, we can do better. Only 22% said they're getting recognized enough for the amount of work that they're doing. That's actually lower than it was in 2022. So even for people who have a recognition program, that number is not that much higher. For people who have a recognition program, 24% said that they receive the right amount of recognition. And only 38% say that recognition is good, that recognition program is good or excellent. Now, we didn't ask people which companies they worked for, but I'm going to go ahead and say that those are our clients. Okay. So, when people consider their recognition program good or excellent, they are 2.5 times more likely to be engaged. It is not enough to have a program. You need to have a change management effort so that people are using the program, and the program has to be good or excellent as perceived by the employees. All right, so this is the last thing I'm going to say about recognition in this talk today, because I could talk about recognition all day. But I want you to know that this is more than recognizing people for the work they do for your organization. Each of us is so much more than that. We live these big, beautiful, broad lives outside of work. And if we're talking about work as a community, it makes sense for us to be seen as more than what we do for the company. When we're seen as whole humans, our emotional cups get even more filled, we feel even more included, we feel less lonely, and we have more to give to other people. We did some research on this topic after COVID, and we found that 54% of organizations do not support the whole human in this way, even though some of them did before COVID. 66% of employees wanted their companies to do this more. So when companies recognize people for life events, that is things that happen outside of work, like running a marathon, buying a house, getting a puppy, employees feel even more respected and appreciated. And this is true even if they work remotely and they never see each other face to face. As you can see, people are more likely to feel fulfilled and more likely to stay with your organization if you're recognizing them for life events in addition to the things that they do for your organization. So now I want to switch and talk about another fundamental piece of taking care of people at work. And that is the check-in between the leader and the direct report. Also, in my opinion, something that we do not talk about enough. It is so often overlooked. This is not a performance review. It's not a feedback conversation. It is a check-in between a leader and their direct report. And I like to say, make it generous. So I call this a generous check-in. We just talked about, for recognition, going beyond what a person does for your company in order to help each person feel more valued, included, connected, cared for. So the same thing applies here. When you are checking in generously, as I like to call it, you're not just checking in on the work the person is doing, you're actually checking in on the person doing the work. So a check in is generous when the leader is checking in on the person and not just the work the person is doing. A check in is generous when it creates an environment where the employee receives coaching, feedback, and praise instead of just criticism. A check in is generous when it allows for two-way dialogue so that instead of only getting feedback, the employee can give feedback to their leader as well. A check-in is generous when it allows employees to be vulnerable, admitting if they are having a difficult time, and ask for extra help and support if they need it. In general, a check-in is generous when it improves or maintains well-being instead of causing negative emotions like stress, worry, anger. So, I'll talk about 5 things leaders can do in order to make a check-in generous. It starts off in a simple but powerful way. Do not jump straight to the to-do list. Ask the person how they're doing. And maybe don't do it in a perfunctory, I know I'm supposed to be a polite, good person, but I really don't care how you feel kind of way. Yep. We do that, right? This throwaway, how are you doing? But in our head, we've already moved on. Don't do that. Okay. So maybe instead of that, ask, how are you doing on a scale of 1 to 10? And based on how the person responds, ask follow-up questions. So if it's an 8, 9, or 10, then that is an occasion to celebrate. And you can find out what is making that an 8, 9, or 10. If it's a work thing, it's something that you can get the person more of so that they can continue to be an 8, 9, or 10. If it's between a 4 and a 7, that's an opportunity to ask, what could I do to make this higher and offer support? If it's a 1, 2, or 3, grace and compassion are needed in that moment. This is the antidote to a culture where people have to pretend that everything is always okay. This is where people can feel in this relationship with their leader that they can be a real human, get their needs met, have grace and support if they need it. This is how people get their emotional cups filled so that they can do their best work. Check in on the human first. The second thing, our research tells us that we get the best outcomes when these meetings happen about once a week. When people meet with their leaders once a week, they are nearly twice as likely to say that their manager keeps them motivated and engaged. We also find that people who meet with their managers weekly are more than twice as likely to say they see a path to grow in the organization, feel a sense of meaning and purpose at work, feel a sense of belonging at work, and last but not least, trust their manager. People who feel appreciated by their manager feel more connected to their colleagues and also to the company culture. Gallup research actually tells us that 70% of the variance in team member engagement is determined by the manager. So when you're having this check-in meeting frequently, it gives people an opportunity to develop a meaningful relationship with their manager. It helps them to understand how their work is part of something bigger. It gives an opportunity to be appreciated for what they're doing. It essentially forms a foundation for how people experience the organization. Unfortunately, these meetings are not happening. So, when we looked at this in 2023, 49% of people said they met with their manager weekly. When we did this research last year, that number fell to 21%. It should also never be forgotten that the check-in meeting is a signal. It is a signal from the leader to a direct report that they matter. So when you phone it in and you show up rushed, it has the absolute opposite effect. What it signals to the employee is that this is just a check the box activity instead of time set aside for their benefit. In our research, employees report feeling more psychologically safe when their manager never shows up rushed to the check in meeting. Actually, psychological safety, as you can see, is actually lower for employees who meet with their manager weekly, but the manager's always rushed, as opposed to somebody who only meets with their manager once a year. But in that once a year meeting, that manager shows up fully present. It is important to be present in your one on ones. The other thing that improves psychological safety for a one on one meeting is to show up prepared. So, the next thing I want to talk about is how to do that. So, people are busy. This is an actual fact. Nobody likes to have their time wasted. So, you probably think, employees don't want to meet with their leaders once a week. You would be wrong. So the research says, Steve Rogelberg actually did this research, and he did a study of employees based in the US, UK, Germany, France. And he found in that research that employees want to meet with their leaders 3 to 4 times a month. And the best predictor of wanting to meet less than that was not their workload. It was actually how well the manager conducted the meeting. So employees want this opportunity to connect, but they don't want you to waste their time. And we feel as leaders like we're doing it well. Our direct reports are saying not so much. So in our research, 90% of managers say they know how to conduct a productive and supportive one-on-one. When we asked individual contributors, only 18% of them consider that time well spent. Yikes and ouch. So maybe leaders should consider creating an agenda that both parties can contribute to. And ever so often, they should be asking, how well are these one-on-ones working for you? You want direct reports to feel like those meetings are quality time and not a waste of time. Because if you're having a lot of low quality check-ins where you never discuss anything important to the employee, so the meeting is for you and not for them, then you're actually having the opposite effect than what you want. So the other thing I want to say here is that check-ins should be used as an opportunity to give employees timely performance feedback. 46% of employees are saying that they're getting less performance feedback than they would like. But our research shows that employees rate their managers highest when, in addition to checking in weekly, they are giving, not just receiving, but giving and receiving feedback at least monthly. In a Gallup study, 80% of employees who received meaningful feedback in the last week report feeling fully engaged. And this relationship held for employees whether they were working remotely, fully on site, or hybrid. So when people are working remotely, or if they're on site and in front of your face all the time, don't forget to have one-on-ones and be giving feedback at least on a monthly basis. Again, this is where technology helps you. At the very least, it functions as a signal to leaders that this is something that is important enough to take the time to get right. And a good tool like our conversations tool can provide in the moment guidance to managers, which can improve the quality of the check-in meeting. From a practical perspective, it also allows the manager and the direct report to collaborate on the agenda before, during, and after the meeting. It also gives you data so you can see for your company, where is this happening, where is this not happening, and do your own research on the impact of check-ins for your organization. Our research tells us that employees are least likely to say that their check-in meeting was time well spent when they lacked a check-in tool. They were most likely to agree that the time was well spent when they had a check in tool that they were using. But again, it's not enough to just have a tool. There needs to be a change management effort to get people to use it. Employees who had a tool but were not using it were only slightly more likely to consider their check in meetings as time well spent. So, another huge advantage of a weekly check in that includes feedback every now and again is that it can take the anxiety out of an annual performance review. This is huge. When you're giving feedback continuously instead of saving it up, it makes the annual performance review far more constructive. Also, if you have all of this information in a tool, so in our conversations tool, you have the check ins documented, people can request feedback. You can pull that into an annual review so that it's less dependent on the manager's memory and, and improve the quality of that meeting as well. All right, so we've covered 4 of the 5 fundamentals of a check in meeting, and we've talked about how to use this to create a psychologically safe space for employees. Now, I want to talk about how we put all of this together. So, you've built the foundation, you're doing check ins, employees feel psychologically safe, and you have a culture of recognition. This combination allows you to do something really, really powerful, and that is strengths based leadership. So many times people only hear from their manager when they do something wrong. Now, when I first came out of grad school, I was given leadership responsibilities. I'm not sure what they were thinking. They were probably thinking, you have this fancy degree, you've studied leadership theories, you should know what you're doing. And yet my first direct report told me, I only hear from you when I do something wrong. It's an easy mistake to make. Don't be me. It's a terrible mistake to make. When you do check-ins frequently, it also gives you the opportunity to hone in on what's working. You have all this information on what the person does well based on what their peers are recognizing them for. This is your opportunity. As a leader, we can choose a few to highlight. We can find other opportunities for people to use their strengths. We can communicate the positive impact of those strengths on the organization. We see your special sauce and it belongs here. It has a positive impact on the people around you and on this organization. This is how you build trust, help people feel like they belong, build confidence and engagement, and create a meaningful and positive work experience. And yes, sometimes you do need to give constructive criticism. But by then, you should have had several conversations about a person's strengths, and the person is also having those strengths recognized by their peers. The research says that people are actually more receptive to constructive criticism in this context because you have communicated that they are more to you than their biggest weakness or their worst moment or their biggest mistake. All right, so a great check in starts with a human, not with a to do list. Before we get into tasks and performance, we need to be seeing and acknowledging the whole person, their challenges, but also their growth. When we make time for these real conversations as leaders, we allow people to be themselves. When we show up and we're present and we balance strengths with feedback, we create an environment where people actually want to do their best. We put into people's emotional cups and they have more to give to other people. The data backs up that these strategies work. Frequent high quality check ins don't just improve performance, they build trust, connection, and a workplace that people actually want to stay because it's their community. So check ins aren't another task to check off, they are literally how we take care of our people. When the two practices, recognition and check ins, come together, the impact on people and businesses is undeniable. Recognition fuels belonging, motivation, connection, and it reinforces the behaviors that drive individual and team success. A generous check in creates a space for meaningful two-way dialogue where employees feel heard, supported, empowered to grow. Each of these practices is powerful by itself, but when you put them together, the impact is revolutionary. Employees who feel valued through recognition are more engaged in their check ins, and employees who have regular, meaningful check ins are more likely to contribute in ways that deserve recognition. When organizations do both of these things, they see higher engagement, stronger retention, improved well being, and better business outcomes. It's about creating an environment where people actually want to perform at their best and where people actually want to stay. If you're interested in some of this research that I've presented today, it's all on our website. So go to workhuman.com and go to the resources section. So I've talked about the impact that these practices have on a business, right? We've seen tons, we at Workhuman have tons of research on the impact of these things on things like engagement, performance, turnover, but also on business outcomes like safety, plant performance, customer satisfaction. But we are in a new era of data, and the data this creates is also super important. Joanna is going to talk more about that later. But AI can surface who needs recognition in real time. AI can surface trends that prevents disengagement. AI can show you a person's skills and help you in those conversations about your direct reports development. So when you use AI properly, like we do, it adds to this idea of connection in a human workplace. It does not replace it. And we'll show you more about that later. But here's just an example for now, showing all the things that you can see in an intentional and thoughtful recognition message. So you see here that Layla is exhibiting the company's value, respect for quality, but there's so much more information in this message. You have information about employee connections, skill, performance, impact. We also see the existence of an unintended bias, and we give people the opportunity to understand and improve this bias or remove the bias through the use of our inclusion advisor. So all of this is good and well. We all exist to serve others in some way, and how we do this absolutely matters in work, in life, and for societies. When we fill somebody's emotional cup, we equip them to be better employees, and this helps our businesses thrive and helps economies grow. But I also want to say that these habits help you as an individual. So several years ago, I was a client of Workhuman, working at another organization. I was doing people analytics and research as I do today. And in that company, we had done our own research on the impact of recognition in our organization and how it was contributing to not only employee engagement, but also customer service. So I asked Workhuman to come in and present to us on how to do recognition well. We started to understand that we had something really, really powerful going on. And we wanted to amp this up in order to improve the impact on business outcomes that we had already seen. So it was a lovely day in New York City all those years ago. And Brenda Pullman, who's still at Workhuman today, came in and talked about how to do recognition well. And she talked about some of the same things I talked about today, particularly about, being specific and intentional and talking about impact. And I remember being mesmerized and thinking, wow, I had never thought about this, this way before. So I started practicing doing this recognition thing well with my team members and coworkers. And then something really interesting happened. Once I developed this habit, it started to spill outside of work, and I started doing this appreciation thing for real. Like, I started to talk to people about how much they meant to me and why. I started to get really intentional and, emotionally expressive with telling people what they meant to me and what I appreciated about them. And it transformed my life. It is one of the reasons that I work at Workhuman and I'm standing before you today. My personal relationships improved. I actually got engaged, not employee engagement, engagement to a real human person. So, as a social scientist, I know that I can't say that recognition and appreciation caused that. But as a human being, I can tell you that it definitely contributed. Now, I'm not engaged today. That's not recognition's fault. It didn't last, but it still does work. So, I want to leave you with these three things as I walk out of here today. Be a good human, appreciate other people, check in with those around you, even if you are not a leader. Take the time to do those things well, with intention and with frequency. I promise you, it will not only change your business, it will change your life like it changed mine. It will change the people around you. It will change the world. But it first starts with you. So thank you for listening so attentively.